Hey guys, we are here to start Unit 6, and it's a lot like Unit 5 in that we're still going to do a lot with proportions. So, for those of you who are like, wow, proportions were really easy, yay, we get to do more of it. For those of you that struggled with proportions, yay, we get to get better at it. So, most people find Unit 6 to be very successful. It is very straightforward, it's not terribly long, and so let's jump right in. Write each percent as a fraction in simplest form. So first of all, we have to know what a percent is. Percent means per 100. So 60% is the same as saying 60 out of 100. And some of these, the ones we're starting with at least, are very easy to put as a fraction in simplest form. So for example, I know that 60 and 100 are both divisible by 20. So if I divide both of them by 20, I get 3/5 and I would be done. 60% as a fraction in simplest form is 3/5 or 3 out of 5. So if you've ever seen those commercials, 3 out of 5 dentists, that's the same as 60%. All right, so 12.5%. So we had a strategy last time where we did 12.5 divided by 100. Well, this time we want it as a fraction. So we're going to say 12.5 over 100. Another way to write 12.5 is 12.5. And in order to say, well, what do I do with that, Miss Fraser? What do I do with that decimal? I'm going to tell you in both the numerator and the denominator to multiply by 10, which seems really silly, right? I'm telling you to get lowest terms. Why would I tell you to multiply? Because what I'm asking you to do is get rid of that decimal point, get rid of that half. So 12.5 out of 100 is the same as 125 over 1,000. And that's a lot easier to work with because it doesn't have a decimal. I noticed that 125 is divisible by 25. And since 1,000 ends in two zeros, I know it's also going to be divisible by 25. Now, right there, that would give me 5 over 40. I obviously look at 5 and 40 and say, well, 5 can go into 40. I can't possibly be in lowest terms. And you're right. I could have divided by 125 on that last step. I didn't notice it. So now I still have to simplify the 5 over 40 to 1 over 8. So 12.5%, 1 over 8, or 1 out of 8. Now, sometimes your percent is less than a percent. Sometimes you have so few things that fit the category that it's less than a percent. So in this case, we've only got 8/10 of a percent. So that's less than 1 out of 100. So we're going to say it's 0.8 out of 100. And we're going to use that same strategy to get rid of that decimal point. We're going to multiply by 10 to get rid of the decimal point and say that's the same as 8 out of 1,000. Now that we don't have a decimal point, I'm going to do 8 divided by 8 and 1,000 divided by 8, which is 1/125. And if you didn't notice that in the beginning, you might have chosen to divide by 2 or divide by 4, and then you would have had to do more steps to get down to the 1 over 125. So 0.8% is less than 1 out of 100. It is 1 out of 125, less than a percent. Now, what happens if something is more than 100%? This happens when we change the price of something as a business. So you might buy an item and pay $10 to get the item into your store, but then you sell it for $17.50. So you're selling it for more than you paid for it. So 175% is still per 100. What you're saying is I'm charging the customer more than I paid to get it in the store, which is how we make a profit. I can still simplify it, divide by 25 and divide by 25, and get 7 out of 4. Or we might say this is a 7-to-4 ratio. It might not be an out of. That might not make sense in the context because the numerator is larger. But we can still put something over 100 and we can still put it in lowest terms. And what we get is we get an improper fraction where the numerator is bigger. It was more than 100%. The fraction is worth more than 1. And the reason it's worth more than 1 is because this was more than 100%. So don't get weirded out by that. It does happen. Now, what if you don't have nice, friendly percents? What if you have those statistics? Like, I took a survey and 28 out of 70 students said they enjoy watching basketball. What percent is that? Well, I don't know off the top of my head what 28/70ths is as a percent. But every time I see that, I can write a proportion. And it's the same thing every time. You've got your part over your whole. So 28 was the part that liked watching basketball out of all 70 that I surveyed. So every time I'm going to put X over 100. So on the next one, if 59 students out of 177 like pizza on Fridays, we would say that equals X over 100 because we're finding out of 100%. What's the percent out of 100%? So 15 students out of 24 like the red Tootsie Pops, well, that is how many out of 100%. So each time we're always going to put equals X over 100%. Each time we are going to solve by cross multiplying, the same as we did in Unit 5. So 28 times 100 has to equal 70 times X. This one's easy. You can probably do the times 100 in your head. And then the one step of algebra that you still need to show, divide both sides by 70, you're going to get 40%, right? 40 equals X. And the thing that was missing was what percent out of 100%. This side is the percent side of the proportion. So this answer, X equals 40%. And you've got to remember to put that percent symbol in there because you were looking to change 28 students like basketball out of 70 into 40% of students like basketball. The next one, 59 over 177 equals X over 100. We're going to do that same 59 times 100. Well, I can just write 5900 equals 177 times X, which is 177X. I would do my one step of algebra, divide both sides by 177. We're going to get 33.333, right? Repeating. So what we would do is we would say X equals 33.3 repeating percent. The number we were looking for was a percent, so our final answer has to have percent. And you'll all notice that I'm switching them so that the variable reads on the left first. Last but not least, if you choose to set them up, for example, 24x, if I put that first, my variable will already be on the left, equals 15 times 100 is 1500. So you can set yourself up ahead of time to not have to rewrite it. Still have to do that one step of algebra, divide both sides by 24, and X equals 62.5, and we remember to put our percent. So on the very first one, this would be the maximum amount of work you would need to show, worst case scenario, and on the right would be the minimum, the very least amount of work you could do. If you did the 15 times 100 in your head, if you made sure to set it up with the variable on the left, this would be the smallest amount of work. All right. On the back, we've got some simple application problems. So how do we take it out of a word problem and into math? Scott got 14 out of 16 questions correct on his math quiz. Find Scott's grade as a percent. So when you guys get your quizzes and tests back, you might see a number at the top of the page, like a 14 with a circle around it. And somewhere else up at the top, you might see that it was out of 16 points. So you'd say 14 out of 16, what percent is that out of 100%? 14 is the part you got right out of the whole 16 points that were available. X is going to be the percentage you got right out of the 100% that's available. So I'm going to, all I'm doing here, right, I'm just translating this 14 out, and the word of should be there, 14 out of 16. I'm translating it into a proportion. So 14 times 100, 16 times X. I'm going to write the 16X first, and that way it's on the left, equals 14 times 100 is 1400, and divide both sides by 16. Minimum amount of work that you could do, set up the equation, one step where you divide both sides by 16, and then you would get X equals 87.5%. Now, this is a word problem. So the very last thing that you need to do is have words in your answer. Scott earned an 87.5% on the quiz. And then you would be done when you have your, short phrase or short sentence for the answer. After a survey, Christine discovered that 8 out of 14 students at LHS participate in a club activity. Find the percentage of participants, round answer to the nearest hundredths. So Christine discovered that 8 out of 14 students. So there's our fraction, 8 out of 14. And we want to turn that into a percent. So we're going to say, what percent is that X out of 100%? We would cross multiply the 8 times the 100 and the 14 times the X, which I'm going to write on the left. The 8 times 100 is 800. Divide both sides by 14. X equals, now I'm going to have to switch that to approximately. Round to the nearest hundredths. I did have to do that. It's 57.14 approximately percent. So if I were to show you on here, I would have to do 800 divided by 14, and I get a much longer decimal. I get 57.142857. Well, the hundredths place, right? Tenths and then hundredths. So I'm rounding to the 4 position, and there's a 2 after it, so it does not round up. It stays a 0.14. And it's a word problem. Because we rounded, we would say about 57.14% participate in a club. So that's not terrible. Last but not least, Colin found that out of his 11 classmates, only 2 chose to have a pizza party instead of pajama day. True story. Find the percent of students who chose the pajama day. Round answer to the nearest hundredth. So you'll see that this says out of his 11 classmates, only 2 chose. So this is not 11 over 2. This actually says 2 out of 11. So when we write that down, 2 students out of 11. The part who chose, right, it says have a, out of 11 classmates, only 2 chose to have a pizza day instead of a pajama day. So these are the 2 students who chose pizza, right? The question says, find the percent of students who chose pajama day. So the question is actually not what we're sort of planning for. 2 students chose pizza out of 11. So the other, if we take 2 away from 11, the other 9 students out of 11 chose pajamas. So 9 out of 11 is the fraction we actually want. 9 out of 11 chose pajamas. What percent out of 100? So we would do 9 times 100 and 11 times x. Have to be equal to it to be a proportion. And when we divide both sides by 11, we get x is approximately 81.8%. And I did have to round on that one as well. If you want to take a look, if we do 900 divided by 11, we get 81.8181818182. Now the calculator is trying to do us a favor. It knows the next digit is going to be an 8, so it wants to round to a 2. We're not going to be sold on that, right? We know that it's 81818181, and it's going to continue repeating. But we were asked to round our answer to the nearest hundredth. So the 1 here, which is followed by an 8. So we're going to round that 1 up to a 2 and say approximately 81.82. And I rounded to the tenths. So I'm going to fix it since I read what I wrote. 81.82%. And we would need our answer about 81.82% chose pajama day. Now let's just say you didn't catch that and you did the 2 out of 11. You would have gotten an answer of approximately 19 or 18%. And you would have said, well, pizza, about 18% of kids chose pizza. And I would say, oh, wait a second. The question asked for pajamas. So if 18% approximately chose pajamas, about the other 82 chose PJs. You could actually just subtract it from 100 if you had done the wrong problem. So you do want to pay attention to what the question is asking. But overall, percents using a proportion, pretty straightforward.